Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the second Q&A session of a four-part series on the TSI revision package. I'm Dorothea Spape, Communication Officer, and I feel honored to be your moderator. As you know, the TSI revision package adopted by the Railway Interoperability and Safety Committee on 30th of March this year has now been published and has come into effect on 28th of September 2023. To give you the opportunity to ask as many questions as possible and to give us the chance to answer them, we have decided to organize 4 Q&A sessions, each focused on a specific theme. The dates for the upcoming sessions are currently displayed on the screen. As you see, today we will focus on vehicles and we will focus also on the questions we received in advance of this session. We will do our best to address all the questions in the time we have. Last but not least, to ensure a focused and productive discussion, we kindly request you that you limit your questions to the specific themes and topics covered in each of the sessions. I am very pleased to welcome my colleagues here, Antoine Defosse, Project Officer, Nordine Boussouf, Carlos Cuellar, Gispe, Oscar Martos and Valérie Genin, experts within the rolling stock and fixed installations unit at ERA. And to relay your questions, I'm now pleased to hand over the floor to my colleague, João Gaspar.
Many thanks, Dorothea, and welcome to everyone that are joining us today from the comfort of your homes or your offices or wherever you are. I'm going to be the moderator for this session today, and I will now pass the floor to one of my colleagues in order to provide answers to your queries. But before we do that, there are some questions that were received in the last webinar that our colleagues would like to come back to in order to give you a little bit more of detail. And the main question that we received were about the application of the TSI to new variants. What happens to projects that are already in an advanced stage of development? For example, if the projects are already in phase B. So how does the new TSI affect this in terms of applicability? And in order to answer that, I would like to call my colleague Antoine to provide with a little bit of feedback and an answer to this. Antoine, please.
Thank you, João. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, we have received several questions further to the first Q&A session that took place 2 weeks ago. And so we think we need to provide some additional answers. And first, maybe to reiterate the fact that the TSI requirements of the package 2023 are mandatory for all projects which design phase is starting after the entry into force of the TSI. So each time a design phase is started since the 28th of September, the TSIs are fully mandatory for a new type or for a variant. So like for new types, variants that are already in phase A, when the TSI enter into force, they can decide either to continue with the TSI package they were applying since the beginning of phase A, or they can decide to switch to the new package. But something which is important to mention, and I think we did not mention it last time, is that when the main type has a limited validity of 7 years for passenger rolling stock or locomotive, or 10 years for a wagon, then the variant will inherit somehow this limitation of the type validity. A variant of a type with limited validity cannot have unlimited validity. So this is clarified in the point 7122 of the LOC&PAS TSI. The maximum validity of a variant remains 14 years compared to the beginning of phase A of the main type. So this is important to mention. Another series of questions we are about the types that were already certified before the entry into force of the new package. In that case, the new package has no effect on the validity of the type. If a type was certified in 2021, for example, and there is ongoing production in conformity to this type, the new package does not extend the validity of the type or does not do anything. So if a type is valid for 7 years, at the end of the 7 years, the type is no longer valid. And the TSI do not change that. So this is a question we have also received. We have also received some questions about the need to put some projects in the list of projects at an advanced stage of development, because you know that each time a series of TSIs is published, member states should notify within 1 year to the Commission the project at an advanced stage of development. So projects at an advanced stage of development are projects for which there is no phase A or there is no design phase started. If a project is in phase A already, it does not need to be notified as a project in advanced stage of development. If a project is in phase A, then either it can continue to apply the TSI as foreseen at the beginning of the phase A, or it can decide to switch to the new TSI regime. That's what we explained during the previous webinar. So we will not enter into more detail about transitions because we already covered them during the previous webinar, but I think it was important to answer these few additional questions. And Joao, I give you the floor back. Thank you.
Many thanks, Antoine. Please don't go away, because one of the questions that we are receiving, or that we received a lot, people want to know where they were using the old TSIs before and now with the new TSIs. Can we find, or can we provide a list of the main changes in the TSIs 2023 in comparison to the previous versions? Please.
Yes. Thank you, Joao. And we can move to the next slide. I'm happy to confirm that this time, for the rolling stock, all the changes are listed in the TSIs themselves. So for the applicants, for manufacturer, it's not necessary to make the exercise of analyzing the previous version and the next version. In each TSI, there is an appendix which is listing the changes with the real impact. So I list here the appendix of each TSI. This was also something presented during the first Q&A session. So we put the link here for those who are interested. We clearly explain the reason why we have listed all the changes. So the changes that are not listed in this appendix in each TSI are not considered to have an impact, meaning that it's a change, but it's a change that softens a requirement or is just editorial. It's not a change that has an impact on project, because projects compliant with the previous TSI will comply to the new TSI for all these changes that are not listed in the specific appendix. So again, for more information, I refer to the previous Q&A session where we explain that with more detail. And I give you the floor back again, Joao.
Many thanks, Antoine. And we also received some questions about why. So what was the main objective for having this revision, and which TSIs apply to this new factor? So which TSIs are being affected by this new revision overall? Can you please provide us an answer, Antoine?
Yes. Thank you, Joao. So we are talking here about the unique authorization for coaches. So this is a significant change in the LOC&PAS TSI. What happened before in the TSI 2020, or before the current package, in order to have coaches authorized in several member states, it was necessary to comply to the TSIs, of course, and also to all the national rules applicable to the member states of the targeted area of use. It means that either it was a complex application with the agency as an authority and many NSAs involved, many designated bodies, many national rules. So it was not very simple. So the idea was, in order to facilitate the circulation of passenger coaches and to enable authorization in on a wider area of use than just one or several member states, we have added new requirements. They are in point 7115 of the LOC&PAS TSI, and these requirements enable to get an authorization for a wider area of use than just one or a few member states. So what was the objective that we tried to fulfill is to authorize a coach in all EU with one authorization only, with a single authorization. So those who are familiar to the TSI wagon will make the parallel with point 712 and Appendix C of the TSI wagon. It's more or less the same philosophy. So what is necessary to authorize a coach in all EU with a single authorization is to have one set of harmonized rules in the TSI, no more national rule applicable. No more national rule means no designated body. Authorization delivered by the agency alone, so without national safety authority involved. That was the objective. And I will propose to go to the next slide. So where is this expressed? We have in the LOC&PAS TSI 2 points, 1.7115 divided in 2 subpoints. So this point 7115 gives the condition for having a vehicle type authorization not limited to a particular area of use. So it's divided in 2 subpoints, 71151 for coaches intended to be used in predefined formation, and 71152 for coaches intended to be used in general operation. Sorry. And I will give you the floor back, Joao, for further questions.
Thank you so much, Antoine, for the explanation. We already have the questions there. So I think that what we want to know is, are all these changes applicable to existing coaches, for example, RIC coaches? And what other type of coaches are they applicable to? Can you please provide an answer?
Yes. Yes, thank you. So what is important to note is that this paragraph 7115 applies on top, in addition to the TSI requirements. It means that these conditions are for coaches that are already compliant to all the chapter 456 of the TSI 2023. It's for newly developed vehicle design, principally, not for existing coaches, unless the existing coaches are compliant to the TSI 2023, but they would need to be assessed according to the full chapters 4, 5, 6 of the TSI. It's not applicable to existing coaches. It's not intended to be applicable to existing coaches. It's intended to be applicable to coaches developed in compliance to the TSI package 2023. So this is really important to mention. Can go to the next slide. So it applies to coaches passenger coaches with seats or with a sleeping car, couchette car, restaurant cars. It also applies to coaches that are integrated in passenger trains, but that are not themselves carrying passengers, like car carriers, vans, etc., luggage cars, for example. And it applies to coaches or fixed rake of coaches. This is the scope of application, but in all cases to new types and new coaches. And the next slide will explain a bit more about the difference between 71151, which contains the requirement for coaches to be operated in predefined formation, 71151. So as they are operated in predefined formation, it is not necessary to specify the interfaces between the coaches. These interfaces are defined by the manufacturer when defining the predefined formation. So this is 71151 that comes on top of the chapter 456 of the TSI LOC&PAS. And in 71152, we have additional requirements. Those ones are optional, and they are intended for coaches to be used in general operation. The coaches used in general operation are coupled with other coaches from other manufacturers. So in that case, it's necessary to specify the interfaces between the coaches. And I will give you the floor back for further questions. Thank you.
Many thanks. Thank you so much. I would like to ask the question about coaches that are already in predefined formation. So what are the conditions for those? And what happens in case of non-compliance with some of the provisions? In order to answer this, I would like to call my colleague Nordine. Nordine, can you please take the floor and give us an answer for these two questions, please?
Hello, everybody. Yes, of course. So reading the clause 71151, you will see there that there are a set of conditions that should be respected. Some of them relates to specific characteristics of the coach, like the coach should not be equipped with CCS on board, control command system on board, neither equipped with traction equipment, electric or diesel. We should have a specific train communication network defined, for the wheels, specific compliance with forged and rolled wheel with a specific minimum diameter. It's applicable to speed up to 250 kilometers. Here it's some example of characteristics. So of course there are others defined in the 7115. And in addition to that, we have also requirements in relation to the technical compatibility between the vehicle and the network. One of the technical compatibility parameters that can be highlighted is the track gauge. So we limit the provision into 40-35 millimeters and track gauge and Iberic track gauge, 16-68 millimeter. Compliance with the 3 rail inclination. As you can see, it's and or. Non-compliance with one of the rail inclinations will generate exclusion to the concerned network. We also require compliance with one or several reference profile, like G1, GB, and also full compliance with train detection system interface document as presented here. The other type of provision you will find in 7115, we just discussed about specific coach characteristics, but we also mandate some specific requirements, like if the coach is intended to be operated in tunnel category B, it shall be equipped with full cross partition section. This is related to coach, not about the sleeping coach, which has another requirement. We have also specified some requirements about for some equipments, the possibility to activate, deactivate them, like the magnetic track brake, the flange lubricators. In addition to this type of specific provision, there are specific environmental conditions to be considered depending in which member state the vehicle is intended to be operated. And finally, there is also within the clause 7115 reference to some specific cases. Here we have listed the concerned member states to which there are rules to be compliant with. Austria on wheel rail contact geometry. Similar rules exist also for specific case exist also for Germany. The specific case on fire safety aspect for Italy with the fire containment and control system, and also specific case on the trackside hot axle box detection for France and Sweden. There are also specific case for the Spain specific track, like the flange thickness or the quasi-static guiding force. About the second questions, what happened in case of non-compliance? We can summarize the situation in two main parts. There are, within the 7115 mandatory requirements. Non-compliance to these mandatory requirements will trigger the need to request a non-application of TSI, which was called in the past a derogation. One example here is that if the coach is fitted with EN UIC brake, it shall be tested following the EN standard 70/065. If the coach is of category B, it shall be equipped with full cross-section partition, meaning that if you don't comply with such rules, either you modify the vehicle to comply with, or you ask non-application of TSI. And then there is another group of requirements that non-compliance will either result into an exclusion of some member states from the area of use, or into conditions for use and other restrictions. An example, if you don't comply with the specific case on hot axle box detection trackside of France or Sweden, the result will simply exclude France or Sweden from the area of use. If, as a second example of restrictions, if you do not comply with the German network characteristic on wheel rail contact geometry, similar rules exist also for Austria, this non-compliance will result into a restriction of speed. Now I give back the floor to my colleague, Joao.
Many thanks. Many thanks, Nordine. Please stay with us on the line, because I think this next question is good for an answer from you, because there's been a massive reduction in national rules over time, and I would like to know what about them. Are we still in need of using national rules, and for which circumstances do we still apply them? Nordine, please take the floor.
As explained before by my colleague Antoine, the main objective on unique authorization was to have full set of harmonized rules in the TSI and to have zero national rules. Unfortunately, at this stage of the knowledge we have and the existing network characteristic in Europe, we still have to live with some national rules. And in this unique authorization provision, they are limited. They are limited, as presented in the slide. For fire safety, they are concerning two areas of use, Italy and Channel Tunnel. For Italy, there is the need for fire containment control system that are to be checked with national rules. This will concern the units of category B, fire tunnel category B. And in this case, there will be also an involvement of the designated body. For the channel tunnel, again, in relation to the fire risk, on the running capability, the TSI, the specific case for channel tunnel, give two options. Either you comply with an harmonized rule, which gives a duration of 13 minutes at minimum speed of 100 kilometers per hour. If you comply with this solution, you don't need to apply any national rules, but there is the other alternative that give the possibility to demonstrate the conformity on the basis of national rules. And again, it will involve a designated body. We have another case of national rules that will play a role, which will concern the sleeping coach of category B. Sleeping coach of category B shall be equipped with other fire containment and control system. And today in the TSI, the assessment procedure of this function is an open point. So applicant will have to apply the concerned national rules and assess by DEBO. Last point, that is one of the difficult one as of today, relates to compatibility with trend detection system. Today, on the trend detection system, there are some, what we can say, call a class A trend detection system with full harmonized rule. And we still have class B trend detection system that are not fully aligned with the harmonized rule, and they are covered by national rules. There is, within the TSI CCS in the Article 13, provision requiring to member states that they will notify these national rules into specific case. And when we will have them as specific case, it will involve only a notified body. But as of today, until the notification of the specific case, national rules will apply, and it will involve a designated body. I think I have answered the questions about national rules. I will give, my colleagues will give more details on this aspect of trend detection system.
Many thanks. Many thanks, Nordine. Indeed, since this webinar is focused on the vehicles part and now coming to the requirements on the train detection systems. So first of all, where are they specified? That's the first question. And talking about the interfaces as well, what is the content of that interface document? So what's in it? And in order to answer this, I would like to give the floor to Carlos, to my colleague Carlos. Carlos, can you please explain us a little bit first about the requirements on train detection systems, and then second, what is the content of that interface document? Please, Carlos, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Joao. Good morning, everybody. Today, I want to share with you the information about this interface document that is used for compatibility, technical compatibility between the vehicle and the interface and the infrastructure. So for first, I will try to do a very first introduction, and after I will describe how this document is subdivided, present some difference between the version 4 and 5, and how it is the transition regime for that. And at the end, what is next with this document? This document defines the interoperability between the vehicles and the control command signaling track side. It's not only for locomotive and coaches, and there are other TSIs involved. This document we can find now in the ERA website. We have the link here. But also you can find this document in the annex of the different TSI in our website. I will say the interface document is a very dynamic document because we have very different versions. We are today in a version number 5, but the version number 4 was already in 2018 with many different evolution from the previous version 3. And also, we are already working in a version number 6, but it's not for the moment a date for the final version. And how is this document divided? Well, this document is divided, I would say, in 2 main parts. The first is the vehicle design and operation, and the second is the electromagnetic compatibility. There are another section also for this document that give more information and also how to apply this in the real cases. Well, not in the real cases, it's more applied, how to apply it with in relation with the TSI requirements. Well, the first one, for example, the vehicle design and operation, we have different subsections with technical parameters, and they are related to subsections in the TSI CCS, for example, 4 to 10, and also in the other TSIs. The electromagnetic compatibility is also another section very important for this interoperability application, and is related to 4 to 11 in the TSI CCS and another TSIs. Now we present what is the difference between the version 4 and version 5. First here, I tried to make a list of the different technical parameters for each subsection, and also the parameter what we are discussing inside. Here we have for example, the section 3.1, the vehicle design and operation, and the different parameters. As we can see, there are many different parameters to be evaluated, and also there are open points that now are closed in the new version that we can see in the next slide. We can see here in the version 5 where the evolutions related to this parameter. For example, in the axle distance, we provided the precise information about high-speed lines. And also in the wheel geometry, we updated almost every table with the different parameters to be concise and also were related to the TSI's LOC&PAS and wagon. Please, we can go back. Yes, and also we can go back to slides, please. Yes, and yes, here. Okay. In this place also we add information about the sanding equipment with characteristic of the sanding, and also how this the characteristic the amount of the sand. And a new also modification is that the vehicle method construction in the parameter 317 was now converted in an Annex 1 and Annex A2 for the track code 1435, but for the others are no requirements. Now I will talk about the difference for the subsection electromagnetic compatibility and conformity assessment. In this part, we have in the version 4 already many parameters that are an open point and that were already at that date working on this. So in the new version number 5, we have closed many of these open points. We provide also standards for presumption of conformity for the electromagnetic field and also for conducted interference. For example, here in the section 3.2.2, conducted interference, we have updated imbands for interference limits and the method provided with a standard. So there are also a parameter was deleted to make more readable and also applicable. We have to also highlight that between version 4 and 5, we try to keep the numeration and all the parameters similar to make the transition more easily. Also in this section, we can see that we have a new section number 5 is talking about non-TSI compliant train detection systems. It's very important because now we are doing the link between the national rules and this article number 13 in the CCS TSI to make this transformation of national technical rules into specific cases. So in this part, we can find a template is in Annex B1 we can use to provide all this information. I'm talking about the different versions. Now we have a version number 5, and it's taking into consideration for this transition regime for the TSI CCS. It is included in the table B12, where we can find that there are some characteristics to be applied. Indeed, this interface document can be applied directly, except for the point 3.22. As remember, this section talk about conducted interference. So this interface document is not applying this section because we are waiting to have a formal vote of the standard for the method of the evaluation. But after 2 years, that will be completely directly applicable. So what's next? Next steps are first, provide application guide for this interface document, giving more information or maybe details, and also answer questions that arrive after the publication of this document. Second, make an extension of the application not only for influencing unit, because this document is applicable only for influencing unit, and you're looking for splitting these limits for example, wagons, locomotives, and other kind of vehicles. And the third is the specific cases for non-TSI compliant train detection system. As I said before, we are working on that, changing or transforming national rules into a specific case using Article 13 of the TSI CCS. So I give you floor.
Many thanks. Many thanks, Carlos, for the thorough explanation. I would like now to move to the derailment of detection devices. We changed the topic a little bit. So I think the two main questions we received are derail detection devices mandatory in the wagon and LOC&PAS TSI? So that's the first question. And then the second question is, what exactly are the function of these devices? In order to cover these two questions, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Oscar. Oscar, can you please take the floor and explain a little bit more about these two questions that have been raised? Oscar, please.
Yes, thank you very much, João, and good afternoon to everybody. So the first question is very easy. These functions are voluntary. And so where is these voluntary clauses in the TSI? You have them in the LOC&PAS for the derailment detection and prevention signal processing, and for the onboard derailment detection and prevention function. And you have in the wagon TSI, the derailment detection and prevention function, which covers general requirements, and then the three, let's say, functions that we have identified, which is a derailment prevention function, which is prevents, sends a signal to the driver's cab before the train or the wagon has actually derailed. So we don't specify that in detail in the TSI, but because there are plenty of different technical solutions, but via accelerometers, etc., you can identify, this is as just an example of a possible technical solution. You can identify when the vehicle is at a very high risk of identification of derailment. So this, at this point, you can already send a signal to the driver. The detection function is send a signal when the wagon is already derailing, and then detection and actuation function is a function which, once the vehicle has derailed, automatically the wagon vents the air pipe, so an emergency brake is produced in the whole train composition. For this, there is no signal sent to the driver. Automatically, the wagon applies the emergency brake. And then, if we go back to the LOC&PAS in the first part, of course, no, could you please go back, if you don't mind, please? In the first clause of the TSI, the derailment detection and prevention signal processing, we provide, if also on a voluntary basis, of course, what should be done in the cab, what are the instructions, what should be, let's say, the man-machine interface when this signal is sent to the driver's cab, And the onboard derailment detection and prevention function, it is the possibility of having just in the locomotive what you already have in the wagon. So the derailment detection and prevention functions as defined in the clauses of the wagon TSI. So please, now you can go. Sorry. Yeah, thank you. So in the locomotive only, you have a system that can be fitted in the locomotive. We don't say where, we don't say what exactly. We have seen some examples which are in the draw hook, and these systems can detect, it's possible, derailments in the whole train composition. So in the locomotive and in the wagons behind. And the same, there is a precursor to a derailment detected. The driver will receive a signal. If it doesn't react in a certain time, the effect is the same. The treatment of the signal is the same as with the passenger alarm for the passenger trains as defined in the TSI. So there is a certain time in which he can react, he can cancel the signal, or if he does nothing after a certain time, there will be also an emergency brake application. For the derailment detection, the same. The effect of the signal and the treatment of the signal is the same. Next slide, please. So when you have it in the locomotive and in the freight wagon, is the same principle, but in this case, the derailment prevention, I mean the equipment that detects that a derailment is going to happen, or the derailment detection that detects when it is already going on, it's in the freight wagon, and then the freight wagon sends the signal to the driver, and then the same thing as before. The driver has a certain time to react, by canceling the signal, by recognizing it and saying, okay, I don't care, or I will not stop here because it's a dangerous place. I will stop 1 kilometer later, or I simply don't believe, or whatever. And then 2 kilometers, but if he does nothing after a certain time, which is the same as for the passenger alarm, there will be a brake application. Next slide, please. This is also a very interesting point, but we'll have it in the application guide that will be published. It's more a clarification. In some cases, we have seen some existing technical solutions that send the derailment detection or derailment prevention to a tablet. This tablet can be in a shunting yard by a guy in the shunting yard that can do some action, can be in the driver of the shunting yard or in a driver on the main line. You know that some administrations have accompanying drivers, but we don't assess the tablet as part of the authorization of a locomotive. So the requirements of the signal processing do not apply because we consider that this tablet is outside the scope of the TSI. And then, yeah. So this is, and the DPF and DDF fitted in the freight wagons, still they can send the signal to the driver's cab via an electronic tool. So, but this we wouldn't consider it as a DDF or DPF in the sense of the TSI. So this can be fitted in the freight wagons, but should not, doesn't need to be following these particular clauses. Of course, this, as the DPF defined in the TSI, remains voluntary. Next, please. So it is possible to couple freight wagons fitted with DDF and DPF with a locomotive not fitted. Yes, the result will be a freight train without DDF and DPF, which is anyway allowed because DDF and DPF are voluntary. And it is possible to couple a freight wagon not fitted with DDF and DPF with a locomotive which is fitted with DDF and DPF. And yes, the result, of course, is that the train will not have this DDF and DPF because in these two cases, there will be either a freight wagon sending a signal with a locomotive that cannot read it, or a locomotive that can read it, but no one is detecting anything behind. But the result will be the same as what we have today, which are wagons that unfortunately cannot detect derailments or prevent derailments. So ideally, of course, everything should be fitted with all this. but for the time being, we will leave it voluntary. There are, as you know, other initiatives that may end up in revisions of the TSI, such as the digital automatic coupling. So this clause, of course, will see further evolution. But for the time being, we would like to keep it very open, and I think already has a good level of course, increases the safety, and yeah, while keeping, and as you know, there are also block trains which are permanently coupled, and there, of course, you can very easily fit all these for all wagons and have all these functionalities. Next, please. And then the derailment detection and actuation function. So these two, everything is in the freight wagon. The problem of this is that as the driver cannot override the signal, there is a risk of a false derailment, false derailment detection that triggers a very bad situation. We all know what has happened recently. For example, that a freight wagon starts this bends the air brake pipe, so there is an emergency braking, and this emergency braking may create a derailment or may create a safety situation with a dangerous good train, which is immediately stopped in a tunnel or on a bridge, or so this kind of difficult of potential safety risk has to be covered. This risk of false derailment detection has to be limited to an acceptable level. And in the TSI, we request, therefore, if you fit this system, that you have to make this risk assessment applying the common safety methods. And also once the wagon is stopped, because when the system starts, the end will be that the train stops immediately. There is no possibility of overriding, but you can isolate it. For example, in case of a false detection that ends in an emergency braking, the driver can go directly to the wagon, can isolate this system when the wagon is stopped, and then continue. So this is the two maybe different or additional requirements that we have in this when this system is fitted. And it is allowed to combine different functions, as you see below. DPF and DDF can be, or DPF and DDAF. These two can be combined in the same vehicle. Next. So thank you very much. And now I give the floor to my colleague. Sorry, I give the floor back to João.
Many thanks, Oscar, for the nice explanation. I would like now to move to a different topic, and it concerns the application of the TSIs to special vehicles. Not all vehicles in our network are passenger or freight. There are other vehicles that are circulating, and there are some questions that have been raised about them. So the first question is, what are the special vehicles concerned? So which special vehicles are we talking about, and in which way are they influenced by the TSI? And the second question is precisely what I just said. So how do the TSIs apply to those specific vehicles? And in order to give us an overview about these two questions, I would like to give the floor to my colleague Antoine. I think he's best suited to answer this. Antoine, can you please take the floor and give us a bit of a view about these two questions, please?
Certainly, João, with pleasure. So first, why did we introduce this terminology of special vehicle? It's due to the change in the Interoperability Directive. The Interoperability Directive of 2008, special vehicles were not mentioned, but what was mentioned was infrastructure maintenance and inspection vehicles or something like that. And it was extended in the Interoperability Directive 2016 to complete special vehicles. So we have first identified 5 categories of special vehicles. There are on-track machines, infrastructure inspection vehicles, environment vehicles, emergency vehicles, and road rail vehicles. So these 5 categories should cover all special vehicles, and we have also amended the registers accordingly. So how do the TSI apply to these vehicles? So when are they in the scope? So they are in the scope of the LOC&PAS TSI defined in points 231 and or of the wagon TSI defined in point 71. So they are in the scope when they are running on their own wheel, in running mode, only in running mode, when they are either self-propelled or hauled, and when they are intended to be detected by track-based train detection system. So these are the conditions for being in the scope of the TSI, either LOC&PAS or wagon TSI. For hauled special vehicles, they can apply either the LOC&PAS or the wagon TSI, depending on their characteristics. We have some specific requirements in the Appendix C of the LOC&PAS TSI, because when they are self-propelled or when their characteristics make them more appropriately covered by the LOC&PAS TSI, they have some specific requirements in Appendix C. They can also apply the wagon TSI. What is not in the scope of the TSI, as I said already, it's the special vehicles when they are in working mode. So in the area where they are operating or working, in fact, with deployed equipment, maybe deployed crane or things like that, they are not in the scope. And when they are in traveling mode, so traveling mode is when they are moving from one working place to another one in a closed area. And the road rail vehicles also are not in the scope of the TSIs. Next slide. So how do the TSI apply? When there is more than one member state in the area of use, it is mandatory to apply the TSI LOC&PAS and to apply the TSI noise. So this is quite new. This is a change. And as a change, it has been classified in the Appendix L of the TSI LOC&PAS, and is classified as a change of category L1 with the generic transition regime, meaning that the requirement becomes applicable in 7 years from now for the projects that are already in phase A or in design phase. When the area of use is one member state only, the compliance with the TSI LOC&PAS and the TSI noise is not mandatory. The applicant may decide or not to apply the TSI or to apply the national rule. Of course, there are some conditions to apply the national rule. If the national rule do not exist, of course, the TSI is mandatory. If the national rule only covers partly the TSI requirements, then the TSI is mandatory for all the parameters that are not covered by the national rule. And if the national rule exists and cover exhaustively the parameters of the TSI, then the national rule can be applied. There is a little specificity for the noise TSI, but we will come back to this more in detail in a few slides. And next slide, I think it's the last one. Voilà. So I give you back the floor, Joao, for about the application of the TSI noise.
Many thanks, Antoine. And it's very interesting that you mentioned the noise TSI, because the next question is quite simple, but actually it's rewarding in terms of understanding how the TSI noise can be applied to special vehicles due to their nature. But in order to answer this, I would give the floor to Nordine. Nordine, can you give us some highlights on how and when the noise TSI can be applied to special vehicles? Please take the floor.
Yes. So here on these slides, we try to give a clear answer to the question. When we have an area of use of more than one member state, as already explained, the TSI LOC&PAS and TSI noise are mandatory. And we have another case where the TSI noise is not mandatory except for the assessment of the driver's cab interior noise. This case concerns the situation where the special vehicle will be authorized on national rules basis. So when you have an area of use of one member state, applicant can decide to apply the TSIs or the national rules. If he decides to apply the national rules, he will have to determine the limit value of the driver's cab interior noise and to refer it into the technical file. We, in the LOC&PAS TSIs, refer to the clause 424 of the TSI noise. And inside this clause of the TSI noise, it is clearly specified that the limits defined there that concern mainly locomotives, EMUs, are not limits for special vehicle. The applicant shall simply assess the driver's cab interior noise and record the values in the technical file. I give you back the floor. Yeah.
Many thanks, Nordin. Stay with me because we'll give you the next questions as well. Now, in a more generic way, focusing about the TSIs in general that we're talking about today, how are ongoing projects going to be impacted by this? And what about the extension of the area of use with these new changes? Can you give us some highlights on this, Nordin? Please take the floor.
Here it's a summary of what Antoine already explained in previous slides, because it's a question we received it several times with the new requirements in the TSI. As highlighted before, if you have an area of use of more than one member state, the TSI are now mandatory. We have, for this new requirement, a specific transition regime defined in the table L1 of the TSI LOC&PAS, where if your project today have already started, so they are in the design phase, and your project concerned, for example, an on-track machine to be authorized in 3 member states, as you are in the design phase, you benefit from 7 years period. So you can still use if you decided to authorize your vehicle on the national rule basis, you can still work on the national rule basis. If your project is in production phase or the rolling stock are in operation, they are not affected. But if you start your design phase after the entry into force of the TSI, of course, the requirements of the TSI are applicable. Another important point is about the design phase. This concept was mainly, the starting of design phase was mainly specified for the notified body, but the same principle apply also when applicants use national rules. The starting of the design phase is when a designated body is contracted. Next slide. What about extension of area of use? Here, as explained before, we have the case of an authorization that will cover several member states. TSIs are mandatory, and we can have the case where a special vehicle is authorized in one member state, and where the applicant decided to use the national rules for its authorization. And if the special vehicle is then extended to another member state, the applicant can decide to still apply the national rules for the extended area of use or switch to the TSI. I think I have answered the questions here, and I give you back the floor, João.
Many thanks. Thank you, Nordin, for the explanations. And now moving a bit to the interoperability constituents topic, we will now talk about the acoustic assessment of composite break blocks at interoperable constituents level. And I have a question here, which is, what are the new acoustic characteristics to be assessed at IC level for composite break blocks? I think it's a very, very interesting question. And in order to answer this, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Oscar. Oscar, can you please give us some clarifications about this question?
Yes, thank you very much. Maybe exactly. So what we have in the TSI is a new point, the 423A, which is friction element for wheel thread brakes. Of course, the noise TSI. And we have defined a new interoperability constituent, which is the friction element for wheel thread brakes. And the conformity assessment and easy verification, which is in the chapter 6, friction element for wheel thread brakes of freight wagons. The detailed assessment is in the Appendix F. So what we have in 6.121 is just a link to the if you want, to the Appendix F. This concerns, replying the question, the pass by noise mainly. Is intended to see how good these blocks are regarding the pass by noise. And we are talking about composite brake blocks of freight wagons only. So it's applicable to freight wagons. Next slide, please. So the interoperability constituent friction element for wheel thread brake already has requirements in the TSI wagon for braking performance only. So in the revised TSI noise, we are including additional requirements for the acoustical certification. As you know, composite brake blocks were introduced not because they, of course, because they break as well as the cast iron blocks, but also because they have a much better performance regarding noise. But we didn't. They were introduced just how to say without just measuring this performance at the freight wagon level. At the same time, we have given facilities to retrofit the existing wagon fleet, which is mandatory in the TSI, with composite brake blocks, because after 2024, all the freight wagons which are operated in the quieter routes, which is most of the EU network, has to be silent or has to fulfill the TSI noise. And we are saying that an existing freight wagon, if it is retrofitted with composite brake blocks, which are certified, fulfill, let's say, the noise TSI without further testing. But the problem is that we didn't have this test. The test that we have in the TSI noise sorry, the TSIs was only for the brake. With this now, we have the certainty that what we have done is right, and that the freight wagons have been retrofitted with the right composite brake blocks, and that the ones that are used in the future are also be as good as the ones that we have today. Of course, the limit values have been defined in this test that you have in this new appendix, taking into account what we have today, because they are really performant. I mean, we have a lot of wagons have been measured before and after, and they are really much more silent. So in the revised TSI noise, now we have additional requirements for the acoustical certification. So the same component needs to be assessed at IC level against both TSIs. The testing process, however, because we have to think also about the economic efficiency, testing process is very similar. It's a bench test. So the economical cost is quite reasonable. There are existing exemptions for the TSI wagon, which are kept for the requirements of the TSI wagon only. And we have defined new exemptions in the TSI noise for the requirements of the TSI noise only. So you have to be very careful with this when you certify an existing block, or when you use an existing block. So if a freight wagon under assessment is fitted with acoustically certified blocks, this means that such wagon fulfills the TSI noise. Unfortunately, today we cannot say that. In the future revisions, we will see. That could be the ideal solution, that we substitute the existing on-track test for the pass by noise with just fitting a block which is certified. That could be. This is certainly our goal for future revisions of the TSI, but today we are not there. Certainly, this certification is a first step to be there in the future. So unfortunately, today the wagons must be assessed at subsystem level against the TSI noise, with the facilities that we already have in the TSI noise, simplified evaluation, etc. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I give the floor back to John.
Many thanks. Thank you, Oscar. We will now change a little bit the topic and going to the standards that are within the TSI. As most of you know, the TSI can point or direct to other standards that are within. And we received many questions about this, but all, if not most of them, can be summarized to a very, very simple question. Are the standards referred in the TSI mandatory? And in order to give us a quick overview about this, I would like to give the floor to my colleague Valérie. Valérie, can you please address this question? The floor is yours. You're muted.
So thank you, João. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I'm very pleased to be able to answer your question today. And then for this question, I will start with different categories of standard that we can find in the European railway regulation. So as you said, we can have directly standards that are directly referred to in the TSI, and these standards are mandatory. So the standards are mandatory when there is a direct reference to the standard in the TSI, or in a document that is quoted by the TSI. So meaning, for example, in the interface document that was presented by my colleague a few slides ago, there are some references to standards that are mandatory. So the application of this standard are mandatory. And the version also that is quoted in the TSI is the one to be applied, even if a new version of the standard is available. So simply, you have a standard in the TSI, it is mandatory with the version that is quoted in the TSI. And we have also voluntary standard. So we have voluntary standard, voluntary harmonized standard, when the standard provides a presumption of conformity to a TSI requirement. For this standard should be listed in the European journal, official journal, and should contain an annex that can be ZA for same standard or ZZ for Senelec standard, defining the presumption of conformity. So for this voluntary harmonized standard, the application is not mandatory. The applicant can use other specification to demonstrate the compliance to a TSI requirement, and the demonstration and the standard to be applied is assessed by the notified body. We have a link in the presentation to the to the European Commission website, where you can find the different list of harmonized standards for the Interoperability Directive. Should be this list is currently being updated by the Commission, and you may find a new list in some weeks. I don't know exactly when, but we'll have a new list soon. So we can go to next slide. Okay, so just a flavor of how much standard we have. We have 168 mandatory standard in the TSI for around 220 references, because some standards are mandatory, for example, in the TSI LOC&PAS and in the TSI Vagrant. And we have 123 voluntary standards in the to be published, I would say, list of voluntary standards. On top of that, we have 144 standards that are quoted in the application guides. So we can go to next slide, please. when do we, where can we find reference to mandatory harmonized standards, so standard directly quoted in the TSI? So we can have reference to mandatory standard in chapter 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the TSI, for any TSI, I would say. And the reference thesis to the standard, this is something new in the package 2023. All the TSI contains an appendix listing the mandatory standards. We can go to next slide. Alors, yes, maybe you can click one more. So this is an example in the LOC&PAS TSI in the chapter 4 for safety against derailment running on twisted track. We have, you can click one time. You can see here we have a reference to Annex J1, Index 9. And so if you click again, you will see in Annex G1, we have a reference to EN 14363 2016 with Amendment 2022. And for this requirement, we have to apply the clause of the standard 1.1 and 5.3.2. So meaning that you have to apply this version of standard and you have to apply the clause 1.1 and 5.3.2 to be able to be compliant to this TSI requirement. So you can click once again, please. You can have such similar references in the chapter 6, for example, so for the assessment of the clauses. So if you click again, you have here a reference to Appendix G1 Index 9. This is the same index. And you can click again, and we have the 9.6, for which you have to apply the clause 4, 5, and 6.1 of the standard. And you can click again for last example. We have in the chapter 7 the specific cases, and the specific cases, you can also have some references to some standard. It should be noted that in the package, some specific references to standard in the specific cases was not updated because it is a request from the member state, for example, in this case for Spain. I think we can go to next slide. And I give you back the floor, Joao. Thank you. And you are muted.
Many thanks, Valérie. We also received several questions which can all be summarized in this. How to identify an harmonized standard giving a presumption of conformity. Can you please take the floor and give us a view on this, please?
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you, Joao. So we have seen just right before that we have direct references to standard in the TSI, and we can also have some link between the TSI and the voluntary harmonized standard, but the link is in the other way around, I would say. And we don't have a direct reference in the TSI to the voluntary harmonized standard, but we have some references in the standard to the TSI. So as I explained before, we have a standard can give presumption of conformity under two conditions. First one is it should be listed in the official journal harmonized standard list, and it should have an annex ZA or ZZ to describe or to specify the clauses of the TSI for which the standard is giving presumption of conformity. So if we go to next slide, please, with an example. So I take the example of EN 14813/1 2006 plus amendment 2010. So this standard, you can click once again, please. This standard is quoted, is referred to in the communication 52018XC081006 between brackets. This is the list of harmonized standard in the European Commission website. Very easy to remember. And you can see here we have this famous standard EN 1411813. So we can click one again. we have in the Annex ZA of this standard a reference to clause 4.2.9.1.7 of the LOC&PAS TSI, and for this you have to apply the clauses 9.5. We can go to next slide. On top of that, we can have also information about the standard that can be applied in the LOC&PAS, in the TSI application guides. So with this example, we can see also, if you click once again, that we have a reference to this famous standard, clause 9.5. And if we look at the standard, you can see that we have a curve in Annex A, if you click once again, that you have to apply or to verify in order to have the presumption of conformity to the requirement. If you click once last time, what is very important is the guide is providing further information on the use of the standard, but it doesn't mean, if the standard is quoted in the guide, that doesn't mean that the standard is harmonized and give presumption of conformity. The official and only list of harmonized standard is the one that is published in the official journal. And then I think we are at the last slide for this question. Yes, so I give you back the floor, João.
Many thanks. So now the very final question, and I think it's a compilation of many, since there are standards in the TSIs which are pointing to references, and there's a continuous update of all of them or some of them. I think that the main question here is how to ensure the timely update of such references to mandatory standards in the TSI. Can you please provide us this, please? Valérie. You are muted. Thank you.
Thank you. So just a bit of history. When we start the drafting of the new TSI package, there was 162 standard quoted in the TSI, and most of them was outdated since years. So we managed to update everything in the package, so that's fine for the time being, I would say. And then we can go to next slide, please. But we know that we have to make it better next time, I would say. And so the working group that was in charge of the update of the standard reference in the TSI is still alive and is still working on the new revised standard in order to update, to have a continuous update of the TSI. So in a nutshell, we will, the topical working group will review the new version of standard and will assess the possibility to update the TSI. And waiting for this TSI update, the ERA will issue once a year a technical opinion listing the new version of standard that can be used in order to demonstrate compliance to the TSI. So in a nutshell, the applicant will be able to use the standard listed in the technical opinion instead of the standard listed in the TSI. We have also other duties that like to review the number of mandatory standards and to develop the next standardization request, but this is not really the aim of the question. So we can go to next slide, and I think that's it. And I give you back the floor, João. Thank you very much.
Many thanks. So many thanks, Valérie, for the answers you provided. And now we have arrived to the phase where we'll try and answer the questions that have been sent live during the session today. And what I will do, I will look at my software here, and I will try to, well, we'll try to answer all the questions if we have time. I will start with the first one that shows up on my screen, which is, will you need to fulfill both chapters 71151 and 71152? I will answer that. It's a quick answer. So 71151 is mandatory and 71152 is voluntary. So that's the quickest answer I can give you. The next question I have here is, are the requirements in the TSI LOC&PAS Appendix L2 not valid for projects that are in phase A? It's a good question for Antoine. Antoine, I will give you the floor to answer this question, please.
Thank you, Joao. So the projects that are in phase A, they can decide to apply the TSI 2023, the package 2023. In that case, requirements in Appendix L2 are valid, they are applicable according to their transition regime, or they can decide to continue to apply the TSIs that were defined at the beginning of phase A, and in that case, the requirements of Appendix L2 are not applicable. There was another question at the end, I think, which is almost similar. The text of the TSI is clear. When you are in phase A at the date of entry into force of the TSI, you may decide to apply the TSIs defined at the beginning of phase A or to move to the new package. So this is, I think, quite clear. Thank you.
Many thanks. Thank you, Antoine. There is another question concerning unique authorization. The request for non-application of TSI must be sent to all member states, or can ERA decide alone? Nordine, can you please tell us about this? Give an answer to this question.
Yes, of course. Just a reminder, a non-application of TSI has a validity, a scope, defined scope, amount of vehicles, is valid by member state, and concern a specific set of TSIs. A non-application of TSIs are requests from member state to the Commission. So applicant has to contact the different member states and national safety authorities. The agency may be involved in this process when the Commission requests to the agency to deliver a technical opinion about the demand. So the applicant has to address their non-application of TSIs to the different member states, and then member state address it to the Commission.
Many thanks. Thank you, Nordine. I will now proceed to the next question on my screen. Some notified bodies demand, based on NBREL recommendation for use, the latest version of harmonized standards over the version mentioned in the TSI 2023. Is this demand by the NOBOs in line with the current EU law? I believe this has already been addressed in one of our presentations, but still, maybe Valérie, you can clarify a bit more, just give a quick answer to this question.
Yes, thank you very much. So yes, thank you, Joao. Indeed, I can give you more explanation on that. So the standards that are quoted in the TSI are the one to be applied, and the version quoted in the TSI is the one to be applied. So even if there is a new version that is released, you have still to apply the version in the TSI, or the version that will be quoted in the technical opinion, but for the time being, we have no technical opinion. And if you apply another version of a TSI, so if you are in phase A, for example, and you're still under the previous TSI package, I would say, then you have to apply the standards that are quoted in this TSI. So what the TSI is giving the list of mandatory standards to be applied together with their revision. Thank you. And
Many thanks. Thank you, Valérie. The next question concerns coaches. So specific national cases are assessed by NOBO and ERA instead of DBO and NSA. Nordine, can you please give an answer to this one?
Yes, of course. There is two situations. The specific case contained detailed description of the requirement. If it is the case, then it's similar to a TSI requirement. It is to be assessed by the notified body. If the specific case content refer to a national rules, then you will have an involvement of a designated body and the NSA. Simply as that.
Thank you. Nordin, please stay on the floor because the next one is for you as well. For on-track machines, as we must comply with EN 14033, is there a clear and exhaustive delta list between EN 14033 and the TSI? Can you please answer this?
Yes, so of course. I want just to highlight the following point. The TSI requirements, LOC&PAS or the wagon, do not mandate the EN 40033-1. So, as explained before, if an applicant applies the TSI, there is no reference to this EN standard, so there is no obligation to comply to the standards in the TSI point of view. Then, if the applicant decided to apply only national rules, as possibly allowed if you have an area of use of one member state, such national rules may refer to this EN standard 14033-1 or not, and then it is to be managed like any other requirements. But important things is that the TSI, LOC&PAS, do not refer to the EN 40033-1 standard.
Thank you. The next question concerns ERA ERTMS 033281 by an estimation EN 50728 will rise cost and time of EMC tests up to 2 or 3 times than by actual national ones. Carlos, I think you are better placed to answer this for me. Can you please give a quick and sturdy answer to this, please? We cannot hear you, Carlos. Try it now. I think we're having some problems with Carlos' microphone, so we'll continue. We'll go to the next question. The measurement of noise values is described in EN 14333 for compliance with the machine directive. Can the measurement of noise in driver's cab in running mode, noise TSI chapter 4.2.4 use the 14333 test code? Oscar, can you please provide a quick answer to this, please?
Yes, of course. As Nordin already pointed out in a former question, the EN 14033 is not referred to in the TSI. So therefore, it's not a mandatory standard because the only mandatory standards are the one which are in the TSI. And what you have in the TSI noise in this point 4.4 is the EN ISO 3381. So this is what you have to apply.
Many thanks.
Thank you. I give the floor back to John, of course.
Many thanks. So there is another question. Are the standards also mandatory on rolling stock? I will answer this question. Standard quoted TS standards that are quoted in the TSI are mandatory for all subsystems, regardless. So rolling stock, CCS, infra, and OPE. So the short answer is yes. And I don't know if are we able to go back to this final question from Carlos, then otherwise I will continue. We have one last question here. When will the 2023 TSI's LOC&PAS noise tunnel, etc. will be available? I will give the floor to Antoine and we will finish here because we're running out of time. Antoine, this last question, please.
Thank you, Joao. So the new TSIs are available, LOC&PAS, wagon, energy, infrastructure, noise, etc. TSI SRT has not been amended by the package 2023, so they are available, they have been published, they have entered into force already. But the way they have been adopted makes it very difficult to read the new version because there is no consolidated text yet. So the consolidated text is being prepared by the Commission and will be published normally within the coming days or weeks. We don't have any control on this publication time. We are like you, we are expecting it because we needed to finalize the application guides of the TSIs. So it should come soon, the consolidated text, but it should be clear that the TSIs are in force and they are fully applicable since the 28th of September. And well, I see there are still some questions we have not been able to answer. It's time, I think, to close the webinar. We will try to provide an answer in writing to these questions. Thank you, Joao.
Thank you so much. Well, then we've run out of time, unfortunately, today. There are more questions that are coming up, and as my colleague mentioned, we will be happy to answer those questions even offline or even provide a feedback. I thank you so much for your participation here today, and it's nice to see that the industry is out there and approaching us, and we really hope that these webinars are useful for you. And in order to wrap up our session today, I'm going to pass the floor back to my colleague Dorothea, who will then do the final talks. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Dorothea, please.
Thank you very much, Joao, and also a warm thanks to all my expert colleagues here, including my IT colleagues, Juan and Said. Without them, our webinars would not be possible. All good things come to an end. We really hope that you enjoyed this Q&A session and that it fulfilled your expectation. Thank you very much for attending in such large numbers. As we do for all our webinars, this Q&A session has been recorded and will be made available on our website in the coming days. Before you go, we would be very happy to receive your feedback on this webinar via the QR code you see on the screen. And of course, we look forward to meeting you at one of our upcoming events. First, let me give you the dates for the upcoming TSI Q&A sessions. You are more than welcome to send us your questions to the email address displayed on the screen below. And then, for women eyes only, the agency is organizing speed networking sessions for women interested in a career in railways. Those are more than welcome to join us for the second round of our speed networking session. Based on the success of the first edition last year, we give you another opportunity to ask questions one-to-one with women working directly in the railway sector. Please note that places are limited. You can find all details to register on our website. Now, last but not least, we are already thinking ahead and very pleased to announce that the 2024 edition of the ERTMS conference will take place from 23rd to 25th of April 2024. All details, as always, will be announced as soon as available on our website, but you can already mark the date in your calendars. Having said that, if you would like to stay updated on our activities, please check our website and sign into our database by selecting the button Login on our website page. And you can, of course, follow us whenever you want, wherever you go, on our social media accounts, X and LinkedIn. Thank you for your attention. We wish you a very good afternoon and a great weekend. Bye-bye.